I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we are talking about the book Torpedoes Approaching from Port. It is a gripping memoir by Arthur Huntington Black, a master mariner of the WW2 British Merchant Marine Navy. It was edited and published by his daughter-in-law, Cynthia Black, as a tribute to the courage and endurance of the crew members who faced relentless attacks from submarines and aircraft. Black's captivating storytelling takes readers on a journey through a dangerous and exciting world at sea, where even amidst the chaos, the sailors have to remain remarkably calm. We're delighted to have Cynthia on Spotlight today. Thank the team at Prime 7 Media for helping her put her in the spotlight today, and ask viewers like you to support creators like her by subscribing to our channel. Cynthia, thank you so much for being our guest.
It's a pleasure.
This must have been quite a task, taking Arthur's memoirs and then turning them into a book. Tell us about how that process worked. Was it just a pile of notes? Was it more formal than that? Tell us how it all began.
It began when my father-in-law, when Arthur came back from the war, and he was very stressed out. So he wrote his memories in I suppose it must have taken him quite a long time to do, but they're very neatly handwritten. And then he borrowed a typewriter and typed them out. So they are typed, and then they got put into the attic, and we were left until about 2000, when I moved house and I discovered them. And during lockdown, I thought, I need something to do. I'm going to transcribe these memoirs and turn them into a book. And basically, this is what I did. I spent a long time typing. I'm not very good at typing. And then ended up with my book, which is quite long. And then I found another manuscript of his, which he had from the prisoner of war camp in which he was, which he called Facts from Sfax, which was the name of the camp. Then I found another one, which was a memoir or a letter he'd sent home in 1927 to his parents, who were living in Torquay at the time, while he was on a full-rigged sailing ship in Australia. So we've got a book about the war, and at the end we've got a book about sailing from Melbourne, Australia to Callao in Peru in a full-rigged sailing ship. So it's really a fascinating book about life as a sailor, starting in 1927 and ending, I think, in 1948, when Japan declared the war was ended. So all that time he was at sea. He seemed to attract things happening to him, because his first voyage in a steamship, he was shipwrecked in Tonga, in the Friendly Islands. It was that kind of life. Yeah. So I think anyone finding this book on a shelf and thinking, oh, that looks like an interesting book, because it's got an absolutely great cover. It's a kind of 1940s war novel, war movie poster. Absolutely great. So anybody seeing it will think, oh, that looks quite interesting. And if they go to the trouble of buying it, they will find it's absolutely delightful to read. He's a good storyteller, always has been. The stories he tells are amazing, from getting torpedoed, one of the first ships to be torpedoed in the Second World War, getting picked up out of a lifeboat, taken to Orkney in north of Scotland. Then there's other tales how they were he ended up in South Africa because he got malaria, and then he stayed in South Africa waiting for a ship to be repaired before he came home with the ship. That was another interesting story of his. The story about his time in a prisoner of war camp will absolutely fascinate a historian of the age, because the important point about his experience was that merchant seamen were non-combatant. In other words, they weren't actually fighting the war, but they were the targets. So they were in prisoner of war camps, but nobody did anything particularly nasty to them. They were just looked after in a kind of, how do you put it, a caringish kind of way, but not so they'd feel comfortable. So he was there for a while, but there were when they left the camp, there were 300 of them going from Tunisia to Algeria, because the Americans had invaded that part of North Africa, and they were crossing. They were aiming for Egypt. Very complicated kind of thing. While the prisoners of war were in a little train that went in the opposite direction from Tunisia back to Algeria. They finally found a ship to take them home. They went back to Britain. They had a month of leave. I forget what survivor's leave, I think they called it. And then they went back to work again in ships, going down from, normally he went from either Glasgow, he normally went from Liverpool down to South Africa, from South Africa to India, from India back through the Red Sea, up to Alexandria, across the Mediterranean Sea, out the other side, up to the end of Ireland, around Ireland, and back into Liverpool.
Wow.
All the time, there were submarines waiting for them. There were bombers looking for them, and they were provided with. They did have, guns, but they only had a very small range, of firing. So they could fire back, but it was more ambitious than successful. So that's the exciting part of the story. But there are lots of details that people will find extremely interesting. Things like there's quite a lot of detail. He was a navigation officer, so there's a lot of details about incidents that happened. Like one night, the Aurora Borealis was on show, and he called the captain to see this, and the captain was not at all amused. Here, there are other things. It's very difficult to pin down. There are all sorts of interesting things. People who've ever traveled to India might find his observations on docking in Calcutta very interesting. Things like that.
It's almost like a time capsule that he has taken this portion of his life, this portion of history, and documented it. And he's lived a much more adventurous life than most men of his era. I think he's lived the adventures of 10 men, if you ask me. Was that his reputation in the family, that everybody knew that he was this heroic figure?
It's very difficult to explain. But if you've ever watched a war movie and you've seen a captain of a British ship in a war movie, that's the man, the kind of man he was.
Yeah.
Stiff, upright, very precise in everything he did, liked everything done exactly as he liked it. So jump to it, young lady.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, he's very lucky
very
to have,
much because he was a great guy. He really truly
yeah,
was. Yeah.
yeah. He's lucky to have a daughter-in-law like you who took the time, took the energy to preserve a history of his life. And it's a life that certainly is worth noting and worth reading about because, like I said, I think he had the adventures of 10 men. What was your husband's reaction when you took his father's memoirs and decided to bring them to life?
By that time, my husband had died,
Oh, I'm
I'm
sorry.
afraid. But Michael was my was his was Arthur's eldest son,
Mhm.
and Michael came along 11 months after he married his wife, and Michael, as far as my father-in-law was concerned, was a confounded nuisance who was always in the way.
That's funny. That's funny.
So, if you think that they had, you, they had a respectful interest in each other.
Yeah,
My father-in-law would not stand nonsense from anybody, and my husband had a bad temper. So
that's
between
funny.
the two of them,
I think
they
that's how it is sometimes with two strong men. They clash, and usually it's their similarities that make them sometimes butt heads. But it is an
oh
amazing story for sure. It is called Torpedoes Approaching from Port. It is a
yeah,
gripping memoir, as I said, by Arthur Huntington Black. It's been edited and compiled by his daughter-in-law, Cynthia Black, and we're delighted to have her on our show today. Is there something you wanted to add, Cynthia?
not really, except just buy it because you will really truly enjoy it. And I do hope somebody doing what would be sociology probably or something like that, studying the psychology of people during the Second World War will read it because every single member of the company who's recorded in that book are so brave,
Yeah,
so immensely brave.
I know.
They are remarkable.
Exactly. No, it's true. I don't know if they make people like that anymore. I don't, but this group of men that you documented in this book are incredibly brave. I think a historian would love this book. I think most avid readers would enjoy this book. I think sociologists, and hopefully this book finds its way into the hands of a filmmaker because bringing Arthur Huntington Black's story to life on film would be a great idea. Cynthia, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you for talking to me.
Oh, my pleasure. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.